We'll go. Okay. Good morning. This is Sandy Scanlon from the Parents of Children with Special Needs Network. And today we're going to be speaking about the ABCs of behavior with Beth from the BYU Special Education and Counseling Department, correct? Yes, she and her team have been doing some trainings for us lately. They also will be posted eventually, but this is a shorter version just for us to be able to get an idea of a quick idea of what we can do to help our children that are having behavioral challenges. Okay, so Beth, go ahead and introduce yourself.
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Sandy. So my name is Beth Cutler-Parraga. I am a professor at Brigham Young University in Provo, Utah. I am from Florida and I got my PhD at UNC Chapel Hill in North Carolina. And then after teaching there and researching at the Child Research Institute for Frank Porter Graham, I came out to BYU. So I've been here about 7 years in this department. So thank you for inviting me, Sandy.
You're welcome. Okay, so what are we talking about today? I've got the screen sharing on some behavior functions, and we'll just start from there.
Yeah, so what we've been talking about lately with the group, and it's been super informative for us, and we've really enjoyed it, which is we want to talk about functions of behaviors. That's one of the first thing that we covered and that we've been talking about because sometimes parents, teachers, other individuals, community members may not understand that when our children or our students have a certain behavior and it sounds like it's not an appropriate behavior, there is a function for that behavior or a reason for that behavior in that the child or the student, it could be an adult with disabilities, that they're trying to get a need met through that function.
Mhm.
And if we understand what the function is and the functions of behaviors to start with, it'll help us not to take it so hard or make it seem like, oh, the child's just being naughty or something, they're just being bad or something like that. Because typically children and even we as adults, we have behaviors because of reasons. So this first slide, you can see the review of functions are these functions. So we know according to the research, there are four functions of behavior, and we all have these. One is escape. When we don't want to do something, we will do a behavior to get out of that. In my past life, I was a literacy specialist, and I'd have children who had dyslexia, who had other kind of disabilities that made it super difficult for them to learn to read. And so when we would start to practice reading, they would try to do something to get out of that, to escape from that. And we all do that. Like we don't want to pay taxes, so we're going to put it off. Or, we should be exercising and we put on the alarm to go exercise, but then we just put snooze over and over. So that's kind of what that is. The next is attention. That something is happening, a child or a student or an adult, or we will do something to have some form of attention. And this is not a bad thing, because we all need attention as humans. We need that. We need to have someone see that we're alive, that we exist in the world. And remember, for some students who have had repeated failure and they don't know how to communicate what their needs are, and they're trying to get that attention, for a lot of people, negative attention is just as reinforcing as positive attention. So sometimes teachers or parents don't realize if a child's doing a maladaptive behavior and we give them the stink eye or the devil eye or something, that attention can be just as reinforcing as telling them, oh, thank you for doing whatever crazy thing you did and getting my attention. So we just need to know that's another one. Another one is a tangible, that there are behaviors because they want something. And we do that too. Like how many of us, um, we did whatever it took to make sure we have our cell phone with us, or that we have our cell phone, or that our car is, like my husband, his tangible, that's the most important thing to him is his car. So he will do a lot of behaviors around making sure he has his car, it's sparkly and shiny and clean, and that it's the way that he wants it. So that's another one, is a tangible. And then another one is a sensory automatic reinforcement. If any of us remember the movie Forrest Gump, and in that movie, Forrest Gump, his mother passes away, and he is an adult with disabilities, right? And he decides that he's just feeling funky about his mother passing. And so he starts running, and he runs and he runs and he runs and he runs. Well, if anybody goes back to look at that scene, they say, "Why are you running?" And he says, "I don't know. I just felt like it. I just feel like it." So sometimes we will do things just because it feels good to our bodies or to our ears or to our skin or something like that. Now, researchers are saying that there may be a fourth function, which is control, but there's not enough research on that yet. So these are the four that researchers do agree on. So that's the first thing.
It's cool. Yeah.
Do you want? Yeah, go ahead,
I
Sam.
really like I like that they're looking into control because I see that in my daughter a lot. You know, she just wants to have a choice. She wants to be able to make her own decisions, especially, and she'll be going back and forth in here. You'll see her, there she is. Especially as she's now 19 years old. You know, as adults, we all want to make our own decisions. We won't want people to make that choice for us, you know, or like finishing someone's sentence, you know, or, you know, deciding how you're going to feel. So they want that control too. And if it's taken away from them, just like if control is taken away from me, you know, I would be having behaviors, you know, as well to try to get that.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Very
I think
good.
that's well said. We all want to have agency to do the things that we feel like that we need to do. And if we don't have the vehicle to communicate our needs in a way that is a typical way, then sometimes we don't feel like that we have that agency or that control, and that can be really destabilizing for a lot of us, and especially for children with disabilities or adults with disabilities.
Mhm. I think also it's good to remember too that our kids and adults want to have interaction. They don't want to just be sit and told what to do, follow, you know, mom, go on the errands wherever everybody else is going. They want to interact on their own and have their own friendships. And if that's taken away from them too, we will see these types of behaviors, you know, related to these functions, trying to get that interaction.
Yeah, I like that. That's very true.
See, should we go to
So
the
should
next
we go on to the
slide?
next one? Okay. So we're going to go, what we talked next after that is we talked about ABC data. So we talked about the antecedents, the behavior, and the consequences. That's the ABC. It's not letters or anything. I guess it is letters, the beginning of the words, but it doesn't mean learning the alphabets or anything like that. So what this means is that, and this is super important to measure, take data around this, and we can do it in very informal ways too. But what that means is like right before a behavior happens, what happened right before that, and then the behavior, and then what happened right after that behavior. Sometimes when we are working with individuals who have behaviors and we think they're maladaptive behaviors, what will happen is we think in our minds that we know the reason for that, and it could be that. But many times we have this thing in our head that we think it is, and then we kind of match it. Oh, they did it because of this, this, and this. But if we don't take the data and really take the time to observe, like, what really happened before that, and then what is the behavior, and then what is the consequence, and we want to do it several times when something happens so that we can start to get an idea about what is causing it. And if we do, a lot of times we'll be surprised about what the function of the behavior is. This taking the ABC data will help us to figure out functions of behaviors, because we can look at a behavior and we can say, oh, okay, we think we know what it is, but really we can be more sure about it when we take ABC data. So if you want to go to the next slide, Sandy.
Hmm?
Mhm. So remember, we use ABC data to reach behind the surface of the behaviors to understand what the student is trying to accomplish through them. So if we just pay attention to the behavior only and we don't look before what happened, that can be a problem. So let's think about our own experiences. Have you ever done something and then someone misinterpreted it and they're like, "Oh, I know why you did that. You did that, this and this and this," and they didn't notice what happened before? How does that feel? I know that's happened to me a few times, and I want to be, did you not notice what happened right before?
Mhm.
And can you imagine the frustration for students, especially those who don't always have the vehicle that's very clear to communicate? That can be super frustrating. So ABC data can be very, very helpful, especially if we look behind that. And that leads us to the next slide, Sandy, if you want to put that down to there. So this ABC data will help us with what we call a functional behavioral assessment. And it'll help us actually like pinpoint what the functions are and what's happening around that function. And that's why it's called a functional behavioral assessment. And that'll help us to set goals with students, adults, children, anybody that has the inappropriate behavior. And, it could be, we could actually try these things with our spouses, our partners. This does not have to be someone who has a disability. This works with all humans. Okay.
Mhm.
So we want to think about that. So the first step that we do that's on the next slide is that we want to think about that we're going to target the behavior. If you want to keep going, I just put that in there because I love that slide.
Yeah, that's cute.
So we look at we think about the behavior we want to target. And I'm going to go back to my years as a literacy specialist. When you're teaching somebody how to read or to write, they're going to make 20,000 mistakes. And you cannot give them 20,000 corrections at the same time, or they're never going to improve in their reading or their writing. And that's the same thing with behavior. So when I'm teaching a kid with dyslexia or some other kind of severe disability how to read at their level, I have to concentrate on one thing. And typically, what I'll do is I call it their most pressing need. So when you're thinking about you want to figure out the function of behavior, my suggestion is to look at the behaviors that are very difficult for you that's in your routine with the individual, or something that's very hard, and start there. If that's a little intimidating, you can start like their second most difficult behavior, because you want to start there without doing the biggest one first. But you have to get a behavior that you want to target, that you want to observe. It has to be observable. It has to be something that that's happening, like they fall down and hit the floor, or they hit someone, or they bite someone, or something like that. Something that's observable that you can put into a space that you can observe. And then you're going to choose your measurement system. And that what that means is you're just taking data. And that's just a fancy way of saying that you're writing something down. And that you're keeping a record. Could be in a journal, could be on a piece of paper, could be in the computer. There's very fancy ways of doing this. And there's also, you can be as simple as just taking a piece of paper, a blank piece of paper like this, and writing on it. So it depends on, your job and how you interact with the person that has the behaviors. It can be super complex with lots of, I'm going to show you examples on some of these slides. I believe we have them in here. Or you can just start with, okay, this is my child. My child has autism. They have behaviors, and I'm really going to look at this behavior, and just note it on a piece of paper and kind of keep it as a journal. What happened before? What was the behavior? What happened directly after? And just like kind of keep that so that you can get that information. So the next step tells us the types of ways that we can gather information. Sandy, if you want to go to that
Okay.
step.
I was writing myself a question. Sorry.
Great.
Yeah.
Okay, so the first way that we gather information is we can do indirect assessments. And these are for our children that are individuals, adults that are in some kind of educational system. Maybe they're in a transition program, so they're at residential care or some other kind of facility. And this is something that you would get with people that are in that space with them. Okay. So you might get a behavioral rating scale. You might get a teacher interview that you've talked to them. And that's how you gather some of that information. That is the indirect assessment, not something that you've seen yourself, but it's an indirect assessment. You can see here, the rating scales might be a series of questions or statements to which the teacher, parent, or the student responds. And you can see these are examples to them. Those of you who work in an educational system or in some sort of daycare or something, you're probably familiar. You've probably been asked to fill out one of these scales on the student with the behaviors. So that's what that typically looks like. That's the indirect assessment. And then you have the direct assessment. And I want to point out something, if I can, Sandy. You see the bottom of that slide? That's for Vanderbilt University. And they
Oh,
have
down
some
here.
really, really great modules about how to learn about behavior as well. So I'm just saying that that's a really great resource if people want to go there and check that out. So.
Vanderbilt.edu.
Uh-huh. And they've got lots of different educational, special education type modules. I use them with my students sometimes. And yeah, so you can go there. And so if we go to step 4, if you want to move there, Sandy, thank you. So this is also now we're gathering information, and this is the direct assessment. So we're looking at the direct observation of what's happening. And you can see this scatter plot. It's a little bit blurry, but that also gives you that little link that's on the bottom there. There's scatter plots that you can get online that are free. And this scatter plot just tells you, like, I'm sorry that the words are so blurry on there, but basically it's telling you when it's happening and why it's happening. And if you look at different, and you just put a tally,
Yeah.
typically that's how they are. And that just lets you know, like, if you're in an educational facility, or you're in a facility where you're working with adults with disabilities, or in some kind of rehab place, you'll see these a lot, that they're used or they should be used to have an idea about. This helps you when you're doing the assessment, because you want to do it multiple times. You want to observe it multiple times, because we all have off days, and especially if we've dealt with, like, I'm from Florida, we just dealt with the hurricane, or if something's going on in a child's life, or if they haven't eaten and there's a whole bunch of things going on, and we just take one snapshot and then we base a function of a behavior on that. We need to be really careful of that. But if you take it, the rule typically is 3 times. That should give you the appropriate data on that. And then finally, if you go to the last slide, it says, okay, so what we did was, in our last training, we just focused on step 3, which was gathering information using direct assessment in a structured format, meaning that we had one of those, we have ways of collecting data that is structured. So this would be unstructured, just taking a piece of paper and kind of look. A structured one is like using a scatter plot or something like that. And remember, the FBA is the functional behavioral assessment. And so what we did as the group is we looked at different scenarios, videos of children who are adults. Actually, we looked at adults with disabilities, and what happened, like, right before the behavior, what the behavior was, and what happened right after the behavior. So those are some of the things that we did in the training. So there you go, Sandy.
That's good. Yeah, and I was also thinking that when you take the, oops, sorry, what did I do? You don't
I
want to
think
see my
probably
email. Oh,
like,
stop sharing the screen. Scary there. I hit
yeah.
something. So I was thinking, when you take the data too, you can even have a little section for notes or other information. Like you were saying, are they hungry? Did they just wake up? What day of the month is it for some young women? What time of day is it? I used to actually use a calendar to just follow Jasmine's behaviors through the month to try to identify, and there was like a certain week out of the month where her behavior was much worse than the
Mhm,
rest. And for a young woman, we know that's probably during the menses time.
mhm.
But it really can matter. And when you start identifying some of those things too, then you can just say, oh gosh, I never really thought maybe she was going through that. Maybe that's why. And we have to just be more careful the next, month. So even on a day-to-day basis, it might certain behaviors might be showing up at a certain time of day, when maybe when it's time to go to school, or when, you're waiting for someone to come home. These are all things too.
Yeah, really well said. I know that sometimes in schools, there are things that we figured out that were functions of kids with autism that we never even thought of. But, like, for example, if they're coming back from lunch and there's a certain door that goes outside, but outside they're doing construction work, and so it's very overwhelming for a child with autism, then they would act out there and try to escape or avoid that. But we never understood, like, why are they just having a fit right here? Like, what's happening? So as you slow it down and look at the data, you can see. The other thing that helped too, I've noticed when I've worked with teachers in schools across the US on the mainland, one of the things that I noticed is that it helped the teachers not take it so personally. So the child is having behaviors, and when they realize actually there's functions for this, it's not personal to the teacher.
Mhm.
And so that helped the teacher not take it personally and not try to, have a personal problem with the kid or the adult, versus, like, look at it more almost like more scientifically and be like, okay, how do I figure this out and have a sense of curiosity about it? And that seemed to really, really help. That's what I noticed that people who start to understand ABC data and they use it, actually get really good with the kids or the adults because they have a sense of curiosity and they don't take it personally what's happening.
That's good. Yeah. Yeah. And taking data can seem a bit overwhelming, and it definitely can be, especially when behaviors can happen during the day randomly, and maybe all of a sudden it happens. You're like, oh, I don't have my pen or paper. I can't go down and write this down. Maybe it's in the car driving or at a store. Um, but come back to it later and try to remember as many details you can. Come back later and write it down in your journal, and try to just keep a little bit. I know I was really bad at ever trying to keep data, but I did keep a lot of information in my head too. But I know if I had written it down, I would have seen a lot of patterns. Would have been good. Yeah. And then,
Yeah, yeah,
oh, the other thing I was just going to say too is besides just trying to identify the function and the behavior, is to check them out. See if there's something physically going on. Like I always use like the example of a child comes into the classroom and they immediately sit down and take off their shoes, and the teacher says, no, 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 put your shoes on. And then the child who's speaking says, oh, but I have something in my shoe. So they find it, take it out, and go on with their day. But the child who can't speak or communicate, the teacher just shoves the shoe back on and makes them continue the day with a rock in their shoe. And so just try to figure out there's a possibility there might be something else going on. They need some comfort. Yeah. Yeah.
that's a good thing to say too. And a lot of our kids with disabilities, they also have some sort of digestive thing as well.
Yes.
And so that can really impact, like if there are certain foods, but we don't know what they are and they don't feel well. Another one I know, I know that my husband, he has an adult child with a severe disability. He's has multiple diagnoses, and one is he's got severe autism, and the other one is that he's got an epileptic disorder. And so that continually causes more brain damage. So it's a really difficult disorder for this individual, this kid whose name is Manny. He's really cute. But one of the things about him the teachers didn't understand was that when he would get really upset, he would go into the bathroom and lock it. And he doesn't have, he does have some verbal skills, but not many. And a lot, and he would not talk at all when he went into the situation. And so what they realized, like they didn't know what to do with him. And then it always would be around right before there would be a fire drill. So then everybody was supposed to go out of the school, but Manny would be in the bathroom, locked in the bathroom, and they couldn't get him out. But what they realized was it was the sound that scared him. And when he heard sound, he would freeze and he couldn't move. What they figured out doing, so they figured out the function of it, and it was sensory. And so what they ended up doing was, and I thought this was very clever, they got a dolly, and he loves like the Avengers and stuff like that. So they would give him, when something would happen and he would shut down, they would give him an Avengers, some kind of Avengers, a book or something to look at, and he would get on the dolly and they would push him out because he would freeze. So he wasn't willing to move his body, but he would be okay if he could hold on to the Avengers, not even looking at it, but hold on to it, get on the dolly and be trucked out. And then it was just completely fine. And some people may say, like, oh, why do you have to go to that level to do that? That's not fair, But again, there's a difference between fairness and equity. So fair is that, or, like our people say, that's not, everybody doesn't get to be treated that way. That's too much effort. But remember that equal is we all get treated the same, but fairness and equity means that everybody gets what they need. And
Mhm.
we all need different things, right? And so for him, that's what worked, which was a lot less time consuming than them trying to get him out of the bathroom every time, but saying, I do what I said. I told you, you need to come out here, do what I said. And he's like, I don't care what you say. I'm not moving, I'm scared. So yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I was wondering why did they not have a key to the lock as well? So,
No, they had a key to the
oh,
lock, but they couldn't get him out of the
I
bathroom.
couldn't get him out of
Like,
the bathroom. Yeah. So it worked for him. Yeah, had to. Yeah, you get paralyzed with that fear. Yeah.
uh-huh.
So, okay. Well, great. Yeah. So, yeah, we have another workshop next Thursday. And of course, this will be on our YouTube channel, so it'll be going on, forever. But those workshops hopefully too will be posted. So,
Yeah.
right. So
Great.
I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording.